I don't even know what to do to live up to that. Anyway, it's nice to see everybody here. We're going to have a great time this morning. I've got 4 of my best friends here today who are actually going to be delivering information to you, and I'm not really going to give much of a speech. I would like your help on something. I am in the middle of writing a book about the future of our business. We're going to call it Game Plan. And in the book, for those of you who know me, I love music lyrics of all kinds. And each chapter is going to have some of my favorite lyrics. And if you get a moment to think about lyrics that you think pertain in any way to a book about the future of our business, if you would email or text those to me, give me a writer or a musician, or a few lyrics, and as you know, we can go to musiclyrics.com or lyrics.com. I mean, this is nirvana for me, by the way. Everything that's come before technology, I really didn't care much about, till finally I just can hum into my droid, and it will find the song and play it for me. That's about as good as it comes. But to give you some ideas about some of the ones that some of your peers have already sent, there was a boomer who sent me the lyrics and suggested that I might want to use a song from the 70s by Carole King, "It's Too Late, Baby, Now It's Too Late." Right? That really, this is real. They sent me that one. Another guy sent me, and you'll all get this, they sent me Carly Simon, "You're So Vain." I mean, these were our friends, right? They want me to put this in the book. And then there is somebody from, an old friend from Long and Foster sent me lyrics from Jimmy Buffett, "Changes in attitudes, changes in latitudes, nothing remains quite the same." So those are, if you got any ideas, I will accept them. I'll give you a full credit in the book. My favorite, though, that personally is going to start off, and I'll start our panel, was this lyric. See if you can figure out who the artist was. Now, you folks under 35 won't know this, but the lyric was, "It's never easy and it's never clear who's to navigate and who's to steer, and so we flounder, drifting ever near the rocks." Now, I will give a gift to somebody who can tell me who that artist was. Anybody? Okay, you can work on it all day, except for you're not allowed to go to musiclyrics.com or lyrics.com to do it. That would be using technology. So we'll have time for some question and answers. I get the privilege of having my best friends up here, and I'm going to ask them to come up, and I'll introduce them, and then I'll ask them to tell you, who they are, a little bit about themselves, and then we have 2 questions for them. I did a little survey before we got started. We have 122 years of real estate industry experience sitting up here today.
You have to say that.
Yeah, and Pam, because she said that,
She's the oldest.
Oldest in years? I don't think so. All right, so
We'll never tell.
Never tell. We don't ask. All right, so starting my right, Jack Kreider is Executive Vice President? Executive Vice President, RE/MAX International. Next to him, Earl Lee is CEO of Prudential Real Estate and Relocation Management. Close enough. Pam O'Connor is CEO of leading real estate companies of the world. Sherry Chris is CEO of Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate. I always like kid Sherry and say it's the new Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, because I was actually an original employee of the old Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate.
That's right.
Yeah, way back in early in my career. So, Jack, just quickly, tell us a little about your background and what you do for RE/MAX.
Well, I've been with RE/MAX almost 19 years now, and regional development is the area I'm in, and I've been involved in almost every region in North America, across the United States and Western Canada. So basically, oversee the franchising operations of RE/MAX in those areas.
Great. Earl?
I've been in the real estate business since 1973. I can't even remember how long ago that was. I was talking to somebody this morning that, I'm longing for the days when we just waited for the mail to come in, so we didn't have to be hit by technology every day and information every day. I am the president of the real estate franchise division as well as the relocation company for Prudential.
Pam?
I've been in the business since 1974, 1 year less than Earl, so we know where all the bodies are buried, and have evolved through 3 different networks, All Points, Relo, and leading real estate companies of the world. So the last time I was on a panel with Earl and Jim Gillespie was supposed to be here, they talked about how I got pregnant in ERC, so at least I don't have that to worry about.
Are you?
Don't even go there.
Yeah.
You don't want to know.
Sherry?
I'm Sherry Chris, CEO of Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate, and I've been in the business for 30 years, and actually when Earl's talking about when the mail came in, I remember being a branch manager, and the highlight of the day was when the overnight courier package came in, and we could zip open that vinyl pack and look at all of the mail that came from corporate headquarters, right? That was fun. It's much more fun today, though. I have been with Realogy for 4 years, and was hired as the COO of Coldwell Banker, and then within 9 months moved over to launch the new Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate. Steve was one of the first people that called me when the press release came out and said, could I have a job? He was kidding, of course, but to launch...
Actually, we were not doing well that month.
Yeah, well, believe me, to launch a new real estate brand in July of 2008, which was not the bottom, but getting close to it was quite a challenge. So it's an honor to be sitting here today with my friends and colleagues in the industry.
You talk about the bottom. I'll share one. Many years ago, I was in Toastmasters and learning how to do speaking, and we were asked one morning, name where we were from and something about it, kind of impromptu, and this guy got up and reminds me of the real estate market, and he got me, he said, I am from Minot, North Dakota. North Dakota. And he said, now, before you guys start cracking up, many of you think the end of the world is Minot, North Dakota. So I'm here to tell you it's not. He said, you can see the end of the world from Minot. It's like, when is the bottom of the real estate market? Well, it's not there yet, but you can see it. And we think we've passed it, fortunately. Here's the first question we have, and what I'm going to do, Sherry, is I'm going to start with you. Okay. The first question is, if you could start with a clean sheet of paper for this industry, what is one major thing you would change?
Well, and I pondered over this question for quite some time, and we were given the questions several weeks ago. And the one thing that really rises to the top, and there are a number of things that we could all talk about this morning, and of course, launching a brand with a clean slate allowed me and my team members to look at what we could do differently. The one thing that I want to talk about this morning, though, is the number of real estate agents in the industry. And when you think about, if I look back 30 years ago, it was really a broker-owner controlled industry at that point in time, where many agents were employees and you had to attend the weekly sales meeting or you'd get fired. And it was a much different real estate environment back then. Then it shifted into the independent contractor, agent-controlled era, and thanks to brands like RE/MAX, who really made significant changes and that swept the industry. And that era lasted for a good 20 years. Now we're in a consumer-controlled environment where the consumer is demanding extreme customer service because of technology and because they deserve that. And so one of the problems that I think we have within this industry is the fact that there are still over 1 million licensed real estate agents out there that are not all on the same page, that are not all full-time representatives of the industry, and it's very difficult for the consumer to sift through all of this and know who they should be dealing with and who they shouldn't be dealing with. If we look at the last several years and the downturn in the market and the recession that affected us all in such a huge and tremendous way, and not a good way. One of the biggest problems, and I know that Steve, you will agree with this in what you do, one of the biggest problems for broker owners was that huge expense line on their P&L, and that was called rent. And prior to the downturn, brokers were buying and leasing huge buildings to accommodate all of these agents that, quite frankly, didn't go in that often, but demanded private offices and large spaces. And when the downturn hit, that was the one line on the P&L that was impossible to erase because of the long-term commitments. And so if we had have been able to look at a crystal ball many years ago, I think our industry would be different than it is today and a better place.
Pam? First, let me do this. How many of you would, the rest three on this point, how many would agree that one of our, if you could start all over, fewer agents?
I would agree 1,000% that you stole my answer, but I would agree 1,000%.
I'm actually buying your time.
Yes, thank you.
You would agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think barriers to, the ease to get into the real estate business is what unfortunately has spawned really the number of agents. I mean, if you think about it, it's much more difficult to become somebody that cuts hair than it does to sell real estate. I mean, because you have to have a cosmetologist license, which requires a fair amount of training. And if you sort of place that in the context of where we are today, I think our industry deserves really a higher caliber of real estate agent, and I think the consumer is demanding that. If you talk to a lot of customers out there, their biggest angst is that they know more about the neighborhood, they know more about what's taking place in that specific marketplace they're looking at than oftentimes the agent does. And I think that is one of the big difficulties that I think we're faced with in an industry where the compensation levels are at risk for all of us. And I think that's really where we have to start figuring out how do we deliver higher levels of service. We have difficulty, I think, in traditional real estate, we have difficulty expressing what our value proposition is. And when you have difficulty doing that, then you are faced at a place where the pressure around those issues start to come into play.
Jack?
Steve, I wanted to piggyback on that. 1.1 million realtors doing 4.5 million transactions a year. The numbers aren't good. And so we're back to 2000, 2001 levels, and there was a time when we were under 800,000 realtors. That's short a time period ago. It's far too easy. The barriers of entry need to be raised. There's no way to ensure professionalism in the business, but it sure would help to raise those barriers. And I think what Earl was saying and where I wanted to go was because of the oversupply of agents, the financial pressures, the competitive pressures placed on the brokers is amazing. Unfortunately, I've seen most brokers compete on price now instead of service, et cetera. And when we get in that cycle,
all of us.
Yeah, when we're competing on price, we all suffer.
Yeah.
And just, we always should do this, but just so everybody gets this message, just protecting everybody, we will not discuss commission rates or commission splits in the meeting while I'm here. I saw you go there and said, okay, we're okay, but just so we all know, and you guys all know, we all know, we got to be just careful. Good point.
Yes.
Pam, anything to add to this?
Well, I think another dimension of what Sherry said, because I totally agree. I mean, what would be so terrible about having an industry that was a third the size that we are today doing the same amount of business? It wouldn't be such a bad thing. But in a word, when you talk about the one thing I would change, it's, in a word, standards. I don't think we have any standards in this industry. And part of it's an issue of getting into it and the low, barrier entry. But more than that, I think we all have to take some responsibility. And I sat with one of our brokers, a great company, I won't name names, but he said to me, if I'm really being candid with myself, I would venture to say that 70% of my agents are marginal. The other 30% are in the game. They know what they're doing. They're productive. I have no worries about how they represent my brand. And I'm thinking to myself, if you could take that same energy and those same resources to get that 30% to do 2 or 3 more deals a year, wouldn't you be in a much better place in terms of not only your cost to, the energy that you put into that, but also the people that are representing your brand out there. So I think as an industry, we really have to move in that direction. We've got to start, instead of the mindset of, I've got this great agent, she's a doctor's wife, she does 2 deals a year, and that's great. Well, is she really doing those deals? Probably the manager's doing them for her. Or maybe she's not doing a great job, and are you going to lose that consumer next time they do a real estate transaction? So there's a real lost opportunity cost that I don't think has been calculated in all of that.
Earl?
The other part of this equation is I don't think the way continuing education is set up today is the answer. I mean, I just finished my continuing education so I could renew my license, and you have to sit there for, I did online a 3-hour course that in 20 minutes I was finished. So, just to make sure I was there, I would hit the enter button every so often and go to my other computer and finish my email. I mean, but unfortunately, I think, the answer has been, and I'm licensed in Hawaii, and we're going to 20 hours, which I'm just thinking, oh my, I'm going to be sitting there on my, because what's happened.
On the beach.
Yeah, well, but what's happened, unfortunately, is the move then is to go to continuing ed, but the rigor around what those courses provide and the kind of information that you get really does not foster an increased level of proficiency, professionalism, or anything that we're looking for. It really is an endurance test of how long you can finish or what it takes to finish those hours. So,
Well, let me make I'll follow so. Let me make a statement, and then I'd like your thoughts on that. From the period roughly 1975 to 2005, it would have been a good economic bet, given the general nature of those, say 81 to 2005, after the last really hard downturn. Economically, it would have been a good bet to pile lots of agents in an office. Whether they're your brands or your regions or your brands or even yours. I mean, the more agents you could get, the more the profit of the broker went up. It was a good bet. It was a good economic bet. Is there something you think going forward? Because basically, I've always said, it may be individual broker owners are nuts from time to time, but collectively, they're the smartest people I've ever known. They're really smart people. They don't, since they're risking their personal checkbooks all the time, they wouldn't act contrary to their best interest collectively over a long period of time. So is there something that you see about the future, the next 3 to 5 years, that you think is going to change the economics so much that brokers will turn away from stuffing, we'll call it stuffing the agent channel, and turn away to say, no, I'm going to shrink, and I'm going to require minimum standards. We've talked about this, all 5 of us talked about this time to time, and say, if you can't hit that within X period of time, we don't have a place for you here.
Yeah, there's something different, and it's called a consumer.
Okay?
Yeah.
So keep going with that.
It's the, I had lunch last night with Stephanie, who's sitting over there, one of our folks, and her husband, who's not in our business. And here's, I guess, an Xer, right? He would be on the sort of, but I'm sitting there and he's saying, you've got to realize people coming up today, it's just like those of us who have kids who use technology without thinking about it. The people coming up are going to really ask the question, why do I need a realtor? I can go online, I can get a lot of this information, and I know we always talk about it's how you analyze it, it's how you interpret it, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who are going to say, you know what, I don't need them, and we darn well better find out why they need us or we're going to be out of business.
I totally agree, and when we look at the way it was, broker owners used to compare themselves to one another based on the number of offices that they had, the number of agents that they had. Am I right, Steve? going back. So that was where you were number one if you had 12,000 agents, or you were number two if you had 10,000. All of that has shifted now. One of the biggest changes, and I totally agree with what Pam has said, and I want to talk about that in a sec. One of the biggest changes that's taking place is the demographic shift right now. And so we have 78 million baby boomers, I'm one of them, that have driven the real estate market and the economy for the past 30 years. We liked doing business in the traditional way. We also like technology. There are 73 million, that's a third of the population, echo boomers that are 18 to 34-year-olds. The way they do business and conduct business is much different. A lot of it is online, and it's no, it's not a coincidence that sites like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn have had such huge success. It's because that new demographic likes to communicate that way. They're very collaborative. They talk to one another online. They want to get others' opinions when they're making major purchases like a home. And so our industry needs to figure out how to capture those consumers. And this is going to be the big change. Capturing the consumers at an entry level and over-delivering as to what their needs are. And that means sophisticated lead generation. And when we look back over the past 20 years, the lead generation piece has primarily been in the hands of the agent. That's not their core competency. Their core competency is selling. And so that sophisticated lead generation piece has to be elsewhere, and it can come in many different forms and strategic partnerships. But I see a tremendous change coming in the industry based on that. And some people are going to wake up and go, what the hell happened? And others are going to be in the forefront of it.
Jack?
Well, Christy and I were talking about, they said, Earl Samuelson, right, said that 2010 was the first year that more people found their house online than through a realtor.
That's right.
And again, Christy and I were talking about it, and we were blown away by it. That being said, I truly, sincerely believe in my heart of hearts that the agent will always be a primary need in a real estate transaction. The biggest investment of their life. They aren't going to, not many people are going to just do that online. I think the agent will remain crucial, remain vital to the transaction. But I also believe that the local expertise, we all know real estate is local, not national. The local expertise is becoming more important than ever because everybody's picking up publications every day and reading quotes on what the national real estate market is doing. Who cares? The local knowledge, the local expertise of the agent is going to be crucial to that transaction.
Earl, any?
Well, as we go forward, I think that data, which is, I think, what drives really a lot of our business, is going to be sort of become the currency, the new currency for real estate. And it really just isn't MLS data. It's all kinds of data. I mean, you can tell when people are going to transact. You can identify based on life events what's going to take place. And I don't think we as an industry really have understood the value of the data that we have within our organizations, and use that information to effectively drive business to us, or to be able to anticipate when business is going to come. If we can get ourselves into a place, and unfortunately I think what has prevented this from taking place is really the cost. You can aggregate a lot of data that you could determine, you could pick an address, you could basically determine family size, the age of the individuals in there, estimate their income. You can then look up to see what properties they own, determine what equity is there. I mean, you can do a tremendous amount of research on what's taking place within specific neighborhoods and specific areas. But I think we haven't, as an industry, really been aware of that. We have been trying to, the whole big issue has been around this, I got to hold on to my real estate information, not realizing that's only a part of It's sort of like a glacier, what do you call it, an iceberg. It's the only part that's visible. It's all the other information that we have. And if we are able to effectively do that, we can clearly change really the direction of our business and change really the direction or the profitability of our companies. But we have to be willing to do that. You know, if I go back, you know, if we look at how we evolve as an industry, if you go back to when the market was, you know, in the early 2000s, when everything was moving very quickly, everybody was saying, look, I don't want my listings to go online. I want to make sure I have control over all this. The market takes a change and everybody goes, listen, you want my listings? You got it. And unfortunately, we have rules and regulations that are currently in place that were, you know, and I remember having this conversation with some of the attorneys at NAR, and I said, look, I realize you have to have rules and standards and things that you need to do, but don't make them on a temporal basis. Because if you're making decisions in 2000, you know, the market is going to cycle. We're in the real estate business. It is a cyclical business. It does cycle. But we have a tendency to fail to remember or understand that. And as a consequence, we find ourselves then trapped in sort of these boxes because standards, rules, and things are put in place.
To finish this off, I'm curious, I don't know if everybody out here is, you think it's going to change. Is it you that's going to make that change? Is it your brokers that are going to make the change? Is it agents that are going to make this change? That is, agents, for an example, a good agent says, I'm not going to accept offers anymore from people that don't prepare it and present it correctly, or something. What do you think is going to cause brokerage firms to reorganize around more productive? Do you think that's going to happen? And what do you think would be the cause of that?
The consumer is going to drive the change. And when we think about the consumer's expectations right now, the consumer is buying, when I started in the business, consumers were buying homes. They've, you know, wanted a 4-bedroom, 2-story home, and the house was more important than anything. Today, consumers are buying community, and they're buying lifestyle, and the home has become secondary. And so the most important part, and you know, others up here have talked about it this morning, is that whole hyper-local piece where the most amount of community and local information that the consumer can have access to is what they want. The agent needs to fit into that, and I totally agree that the role of the agent is not going to go away. It's that you know, face-to-face part of making your largest economical decision that's very important. It's not going to go online, but it's going to be a combination of outside strategic partners, which as an industry we've been pushing back on for a number of years. And so it's a combination of partnering strategically with those who are experts in both providing information and able to capture the purchasers and anticipate when they're going to buy, and it's the agent and broker. So it really, you know, the way I see it is it's more of a triangular relationship moving forward: broker owner and strategic partners, agent and consumer. Everyone has to work together and acknowledge that everyone is needed.
I think we're at a point where leadership has never been more important. And when you say, who do you want to be picking up that, you know, taking that charge? I would like to think it's the people in this room and the brokers who lead the business, because, you know, Earl brings up a great point. That whole data analytics thing is so huge, and we're not even tapping into that. You know, our concern about privacy and all that, well, that cat's out of the bag. So I know we've looked at that, and, you know, when you think about being able to see that somebody registered at Target for the, you know, the baby thing, that means maybe they're ready to go to another house. I mean, there's a lot that we could be doing to drive where the business is going. And I think whoever's adding value, if the broker's adding value by generating leads, by providing, you know, helping those competency level go up. You know, we're in a business right now where, think about it, 1/3 of the sellers right now in this industry are not our traditional homeowners. They're the banks, you know, right now at this particular moment in time. And, you know, it's one thing to talk about distressed properties. Are we really understanding what investor buyers are looking for? There's so many areas that I think the brokers in this industry could add tremendous value. And if we do that, then I think the business is going to go in a great direction. But if we don't, you know, we're going to be sort of reacting again.
that kind of leads into, and we'll just keep going, is what should brokers be doing to remain relevant when the number of intermediaries is growing? Jack, what do brokers do to remain relevant?
There's no doubt it's becoming more difficult. Just like the consumer is now more technologically based, so are the agents. The agents don't need to come into the office anymore. I think Sherry mentioned that. So it's harder to touch the agent and provide those services and make them aware of those services and sell those services and charge the right fees for those. It's definitely becoming tougher. But I also believe that we need to be careful not to overreact to what is, without a doubt, the worst real estate market that we will ever see in our lifetime.
We sure hope so.
We sure, yeah, knock on wood, we sure hope so. When I saw the question on intermediaries, I said, which one specifically would you like to refer to? Because there are so many people outside of our business now affecting our business, and usually not in a positive way.
Well, it's part of the question in my mind was, let me rephrase it and ask it to be a little more specific. We've been in a 30-year dogfight over commission split. The brokers and your companies have spent billions of dollars, billions and billions, marketing, education, relocation, technology, facility, management, so on and so forth. But if you really look at the 30-year picture and look at the actual hard data, this has been really just nothing but a big fight over commission split, with the broker gradually giving ground. And now we got to get rid of space, because economically we can't recover. Nobody's, at least in 30 years, been able to recover on a split issue much or for long. So you're not going to have the cash flow, and assuming we come out of this, which we will, and we'll grow, and it'll be slow but steady growth, the money's just not going to be there to go back to those offices. How does it, you brought up the point is relevant first to your sales professionals, right? How do you, if you don't have the space and more people are working out of homes, what kind of challenge does that prevent for a broker? So part one is to be relevant to agents where you're not just in a split war. You touched on it a little bit, but other comments.
I think
the second part would be brokers relevant to consumers.
You know, we sort of had this conversation about what do real estate agents want. And I think for a lot of them, their ability, I'm going to go back to the data because I'm really sort of focused in on how can I provide them with the kind of information and the kind of leads that really drive them to an organization. You know, we often talk about splits, and my answer to splits is always, look, the split isn't the issue, it's your net income is the issue. And are we delivering the kinds of services and the kinds of pieces of things that you're looking for? Can we help you maintain databases or CRMs around your client base? You know, NAR says that most of the resales don't take place with the same agent because they've either lost touch. And I think if you can provide CRM bases for your agents, if you can provide them with the kind of things that they can't do, what they're very good at is building relationships and selling. I think they're clearly getting better at negotiating. But what they're not very good at is managing their databases, managing information around who their client bases are. Because if you think about it, if you've been in the business 15 years, and you started with somebody that had children that were 5, they're now leaving, so they're empty nesters. That gives you an indication that you potentially have somebody that's going to downsize or going to change really their housing style. Again, this gets back to data that we all have in our companies. And we have to be able to, again, package that so that our agents can use it. You asked the question earlier, where do you think the change? You know, I think in the network that I'm fortunate to be part of, I think where we see the most change taking place is with our companies. And I think our job as a franchisor is to be able to leverage those ideas, because listen, making a decision out of California thinking it's going to fit everywhere is not going to work. On the other hand, if I have companies, and I do, that are tremendous in what they're doing in their local markets, I think my job then becomes, how do I leverage that idea and see whether or not we can deliver it to more people throughout the network? So I do believe that the ideas are going to come from the individual companies, that Earl Lee isn't going to wake up one morning and go, oh, it's a great idea. You know,
Eureka!
We're going to get them from our brokers and our affiliates in our network. And we have a number of companies that are doing phenomenal things with CRM that I believe, again, it's back to all this data that we have.
Pam?
Well, not to sound like, Miss Pollyanna, but I do still believe at the end of the day, it is still a people business. And I think a lot of what, at least in my experience, the companies that I know that, have a lot of stability and retention and not a lot of turnover are the people with a culture. And you can have a culture in person, but you can also have it online. I mean, I think where the world is getting a lot more creative is, what Sherry mentioned, the whole Facebook era that we live in. This is a huge way to stay connected and not have to be in the same physical office. So I think, I really do believe we've made already a major shift in the whole brick and mortar mentality. And part of it, obviously, it was all pretty much driven by the economy. But I have I think in past years, we've had other downturns where people then, kind of forgot about it. As Wes Foster said, I fired the guys that were watering the plants because I realized how much money we were spending. But he says, all of a sudden they're back, when the market comes back. But I think that those days are gone. I think that there's been a mental shift now away from that. What worries me, though, is, and I hope I don't offend anybody who's maybe going down this route, but I'm very concerned about the whole virtual brokerage idea, in the sense of companies that are just bringing in bodies and again, perpetuating the very thing we want to get away from, without any management, without any oversight, and, just to make that quick buck. I think at the end of the day, we've all got to start thinking longer term instead of what is our immediate problem, where's our pain today, and how do we fix it? Instead, where do we want to be 5 years from now? And we've got to start building that, and sometimes that means making some tough decisions.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to come out here. 15 minutes, thank you. I'll check first. Questions? Yep.
Other than Sherry, who started from scratch, which is great, and had the opportunity to start with a clean slate, how did the rest of you deal with your large networks of brokers who, you're saying all the things that need to happen, but you got thousands of folks out there that you have to convince to do it, and not all of them are going to. How do you deal with that?
Well, I don't know about everybody else. We're probably in a little different position because we don't have the contracts, the long-term contracts, but we're trying to practice what we preach. We're house cleaning. Every year when we go through our renewals, we drop companies that either aren't engaged, and they may not be bad companies, but they're not our kind of companies, and they're not looking at the business the way we want them to look at the business. And I don't mean the way we want to, the way we think the business needs to be looked at. And so, I think it's incumbent on all of us to again, going back to the standards thing. So we preach it, we talk about these things, and I think we are seeing a shift. Even with some of our largest companies that never used to think this way, I'm starting to see a little movement there. So, and we're doing things, the online community, a lot of those, major initiatives that we're taking on, that because you have to be able to communicate, and you've got to build. That whole Friends era, the TV show Friends, where I used to say, we've got this great team, and what worries me, the good news is they're as loyal to each other as they are to the company, and what happens if one leaves? Well, one of them's sitting over there, and he left already, so maybe he started. No, he got recruited away by one of my board members. How unfair is that? We love him still. Anyway, but the point is, I think if we build those communities and we have that kind of culture, I think we've really got a good opportunity.
Jack?
And
Because you guys have been going through some house cleaning.
absolutely. And as stupid as this sounds, back to the basics, we were guilty of making cost cuts in the bad market and got away from what we do best and the services and some of the things we provide. And Pam said it's a people business. Absolutely. We're getting back to the basics. I am going to be on the road in our offices talking to our broker owners and our agents for more than 50% of the time this year. And we got away from that. And as brokers, when times were good, I know we got away from the business meetings. We got away from so many things that we used to do, which enabled us to touch our agents and build those relationships. And I think as brokers, we need to get back to those basics as well.
Yeah, I would, when you have a large network and you have entrepreneurs who run their companies, getting their attention is always difficult. But what I find is if we have the right leadership perspectives in place, number one, because I think real estate companies are basically leadership-driven cultures. So we have to have that piece. I think the other piece, and you touched on it, is really, do we have a relationship with our broker owners? Are we communicating at a level that allows them to, one, express their opinions, at the same time, make sure that our mutual interests are served? That's not always easy. You're not always going to be in agreement with everything out there. I tend to operate off the premise that if I can have a level of understanding, they can have an understanding of what our issues are, and we can have an understanding of what their issues are. We may not have an agreement, but we're clearly going to be moving in the right direction. I really don't have the expectation that if we have a new product or a new service, that I'm going to have 100% adoption. That's just not going to happen. On the other hand, if I can get the majority of the folks to sort of move in that direction, then I view it as a success. And we have several products out there where I have, just an agent adoption. I have about 60% of the agents are actually using the product. And from a franchisor standpoint, I look at that as a huge win for us.
Jack?
I wanted to add, we all represent networks, obviously, and it may sound like a selfish statement, but Earl touched on it. The best ideas come from the field, and the wonderful thing about being part of a network is the ideas, the sharing of ideas that you get from the field through all of these different all these different folks, and picking the one or two that sound like the one that will work.
Another question? Yep. Go ahead.
Okay,
Would you stand up so we can, yep.
So, I'm probably younger than a lot of people that have real estate.
We're fairly certain about that, yeah.
But that does give me some advantages and disadvantages. One, like when I walked out of my hotel room this morning and got this thing called the newspaper that I'd already read everything in on my iPad the night before. Plus, everybody my age, I know how they're acting. All my friends are buying homes, this, that, and the other. Kind of three comments and questions. One, I think the data mining, being in IT, is the future for us to generate more leads and that kind of stuff. Two, barring legislature, going back to the very beginning of this, not letting as many agents in, doesn't that give the broker the perfect opportunity to become the best broker in the market by restricting who they're going to hire? And I think that was kind of originally on the docket tomorrow, how to recruit and retain killer agents. It's not on here, but I think it was also get rid of the trash. So we'll probably, or whatever it said. And then kind of the third thing that I've been concerned about, and I'd like to hear people with more experience in the industry, is going from employee to independent agent to a very consumer-centric. What are your opinions on the back to employee model, such as a Redfin, who is an agent there for you, this and that, but I can get online, I can search, I can find my own house, and I can kind of start that offer. Is there a risk that this whole industry that they're starting and going back to, is that going to blindside all of us with the traditional real estate mindset?
Oh, those are great questions, and I'll
Do you remember
start.
all of them?
Yeah, I hope so. I'm going to start with the last one because I know I remember that one. The industry. There are pioneers in the industry that I have a lot of respect for, that have gone out and tried to do things differently. Some of the examples would be Zip Realty, Redfin, Christina Wise, who's sitting in the front row, her company, and these individuals and companies have the courage to go out and try something different. And in fact, last year we did a study on 24 of these companies called the Beta Broker Project. And we identified some common threads throughout these smaller startups that were doing things differently. One of the threads was that the way they had set themselves up would be difficult for them to grow into a huge thousands of agent company because of cost, for one thing. So if you look at an agent employee model, it's very costly for the broker. And also it takes away the entrepreneurial spirit of our industry. The independent contractors are competing against one another, and let's face it, we're all in sales. If you become an employee and you're handed your business, it changes dramatically. There is a place, though, for that, and it's not a one-size-fits-all industry. I see moving forward the industry being made up of very successful small companies that have really figured out the technology piece and are able to move quickly, and very successful large companies. So it's not going to shift in any direction. And when we think about it, if we go back 15, 20, 30 years, well, 30 years it was primarily small companies. But as the years went on, there was a combination of large and small that will continue. Now, I can't remember your other questions, but that was really the main one, right? Yes.
Earl?
I think that there is a place for employee real estate agents. And I think where we miss the boat is if we're trying to build our companies, we have to be able to attract younger talent. And younger talent is basically looking for somewhat of a safety net. And I do view that as a means to sort of incubate, for want of a better term, real estate agents. I think the reason that we have failed as an industry to do that well is we have used traditional managers to manage employees, and they don't have the mindset necessary. I think if we were able to go out and, look, Xerox, IBM, a number of companies use salaried sales professionals in other industries. I think what they've done better than we have is they have the systems and the processes, and they have the mentality that says, if you don't do this, we are going to unfortunately take you out. We in the real estate business go, well, you didn't do it this week. How about you do it next week? And, I can say when I was when I owned part of a company in Honolulu, we did try this employee piece. And the reason we failed is we had the wrong manager. We knew after about 6 months we were going to tank on that project because we weren't getting what we needed because we had the wrong manager. So I think part of this is a mental shift for us as an organization.
And I think it's about integration. It's not just about you have this kind of company that does this way and this kind of company that does it this way. I think you have to weave all that in. I think the point that Earl brings up with newer agents, how are we going to get these guys into our business when there's no income from day one? So I think there's a way to experiment there. But it was interesting, through the years we've all heard the whole thing about, well, if we could only, manage our people in a way, because we have the power of the paycheck, they'd do everything we want. But I was talking to a guy in England who, there they do have salaried agents, and he made the point. He says, "Oh, they're all lazy. They, because they get an income. So, the grass is always greener, right? Somebody else, we're always thinking, has a better idea." But I really think that to take, some of the pieces and the nuggets of some of these innovators and use some of that is a good thing. But I will say, you all saw, Zip Realty, as an example, just closed several offices, and I thought the interesting part of it wasn't that, because a lot of people have closed offices in this environment, but more that they are changing their model back to more of the relationship, that not discount, all of that sort of thing, which to me speaks to what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it was. There was so much glee coming into our office's emails, hey, did you hear they closed off those dirt bags, are not going to make it? And I said, you know, I got a cautionary word for you. When you go back and look in history in our business, which I'm doing part of this project. So Remax started in 1973. It was 1984 before Remax had a breakout. Keller Williams started in 1987. It was 1999, 2000 before they had a breakout. If Long and Foster, Weichert, you go right down the list, we lined them all up, 10 to 12 years on a national basis before firms of the last 30 years, 40 years had a breakout. That is, they banged away, banged away, banged away, nothing happened, nothing happened. Here's one for you, Redfin. Been in Chicago 3 years, 4 years, I think now. 5% buy side market share. Oops. By the way, when Remax and Keller Williams had their breakouts and really started making hash of the existing order of things, they had less than 2% share. I'm warning people, I don't know which one it is, and I don't even know it's there yet. I really don't know. The other thing I will tell you is, I'll add to this, if you want to talk to some very sharp brokers, talk to Pam Furtney, Century 21, forget the last name, Jacksonville, North Carolina, home of Camp Lejeune, Marine Corps. We just interviewed her. She's got 36 agents. She's got 15 full-time support staff. 15, their average productivity is about 16, 17 transactions an agent. They got property management, relocation, lead generation, lead management in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Or you talk to Michael Doyle. He's the future, not for the model he runs, but how he runs it. Michael Doyle and his wife own Assist-A-Cell in Halifax, Nova Scotia. After 7 years, they're number 3 in the market. And with 7 people doing 420 transactions a year. And I asked him, I said, well, how is it so many Assist-A-Cells fail? And Help You Cells, that model fails and you are doing well. He said, most of them forget the model works, stick with the model. This is what we do. This is how we do it. We're not going to chase every other deal. We're not going to keep adding agents. I think these are some, not that Assist-A-Cell's not it. What he's saying and what Pam Furtney said, another guy I talked to in Elko, Nevada. And he's got a quarter of the agents in the market and 55% market share. By the way, Elko, for those of you who don't know.
Only 5 transactions.
No, yeah, listen, Pam. I didn't know this. We're doing a series in Real Trends on finding all these brokers that are doing really amazing things in smaller markets. Well, I really found that Elko is the largest concentration of gold mines on the planet. I didn't know that. It's a very wealthy area. Ranches, gold, silver mining. Only 24,000 people. I'll tell you, I want that guy's company because he sounds like the most unstressed broker I've talked to in the last 5 years. The point, I think, summarizing a little bit, what we're going to see in the future, I think Sherry said it, and Pam, you all said it, a lot of different approaches. But I think my research so far says, is it possible to have a company like Kentwood in Denver, Colorado? They've had the same commission plan for 30 years. And they're never going to be number 1. They didn't set out to be number 1. They made an economic model that works for them. And if you're not doing at least 5 or 6 million, there's no room for you there. Remax, for years, kind of firms, many of them still do, still have those operations. What Pam referred to, and I think everybody referred to, is you got to decide what you want to be.
Yeah.
You got to, what kind of firm you want to have. Brokers are going to lead this. Brokers are going to be the ones, I think, ultimately, who when we say what's going to happen to the agent count, it's when good brokers who have the information resources Earl talks about, the CRM that several of you mentioned, all those tools, when you have all those and you're delivering that kind of value, is when a broker is going to say, you know what, I can't invest in all that and build great community within my people, and I can't then let people, half my agent force, be people that didn't do a single deal. It's not economic because we're not going to have the offices and stash them anymore. So good. It's very marginal, low cost, very, very low marginal cost. But it's more about your community and your sense of standards and what it says to the rest of your people if you permit that to continue. So that's kind of my theory on that. I guess we're out of time. Final?
Oh, we're out of time?
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just want to say leadership was mentioned earlier. It's all about leadership. There have always been all kinds of models in our industry. There always will be. It comes down to leadership, and the true leaders of real estate, they can make it work under any model. Now, you know, I'm from RE/MAX, so I'm not supposed to say that because, you know, we've got the greatest model in the world. But the truth be told...
Well, we thought that was the case.
Yeah, exactly. Truth be told, the true leaders in this industry can make any model work.
I agree.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank our panel.